morning all. So today's video is going to look at the poem Provide, Provide by Robert Frost. Okay, so before we get into the poem itself, I want to think about a few questions around the topics of the poem. So what kind of advice have your parents or guardians given you about life and growing up? How do you feel when they give you this advice? How do you react to it? And do you always accept their advice, or does it sometimes kind of annoy you and you feel like, oh, stop telling me what to do, you don't know? Okay, so have a think about those questions, because they are going to be important ideas to have when we're looking at this poem. So today we are analysing the poem Provide, Provide, discuss the effects of practical pressures on life, and begin to examine Frost's life and poetry in a bit more detail. Okay, so looking at what this is a poem does have some social critique in it, and looking at what he is critiquing. Okay, so in terms of advice your parents and guardians give you about life, and growing up, there's a huge amount of advice people might get. Here we might be looking at the idea of getting jobs, going to college, getting a well-paying job, being able to provide for yourself, okay, becoming self-sufficient. It may be, I'm not going to talk about you react your own ways. Some people do find it a bit irritating when parents keep going on about it. Some people, if you keep being told something over and over again, it can be quite irritating, and that may come into the poem as well, because being told things too much. And the acceptance of their advice, that's really something for you to think about yourself. The main thing we're looking at here is this idea of being told that you should be able to provide for yourself, because that is the concept that we're going to look at in this poem. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Provide, provide. The witch that came, the withered hag, to wash the steps with pail and rag, was once the beauty Abishag, the picture pride of Hollywood. Too many fall from great and good for you to doubt the likelihood. Die early and avoid the fate, or if predestined to die late, make up your mind to die in state. Make the whole stock exchange your own. If need be, occupy a throne where nobody can call you crone. Some have relied on what they knew, others on simply being true. What worked for them might work for you. No memory of having starred atones for later disregard, or keeps the end from being hard. Better to go down dignified, with boughten friendship at your side, than none at all. Provide, provide. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this poem. We want to just take a first view, so when we take the first impressions of it, there may be a few kind of images and things in there that you don't quite get, but we will go through them in time. There's 3 questions to kind of look at, first of all, just to get your first kind of ideas about the poem going. What does the narrator use the image of Abishag to tell the listener? What advice does the narrator try to give in stanzas 3 and 4? And what is the overall message of the poem from your first reading? What do you think the overall message is? Now I'm going to say you should probably pause the video here for a few minutes. You're going to need to read through this poem at least 3 or 4 times to really start getting a good understanding of it. So you need to have that really good familiarity with the poem before we go into the deeper analysis. Okay, so you can pause the poem now. Pause the video. Okay, so question 1. What does the narrator use the image of Abishag to tell the listener? Okay, so Abishag, the image we get of Abishag is a withered hag, a withered old woman who is washing steps with a bucket and a rag. Okay, so we see someone who's very poor, who's destitute, who is struggling in life. But we are told that she was once the picture pride of Hollywood. She was once the most beautiful person out there, okay, but that person who was at the height of fame and height of glory fell from that position and has now ended up destitute. Okay, so really what he's probably trying to tell us here is to beware of fame and glory. They don't always last. People fall out of them. If we look at stanzas 3 and 4, the advice here is a bit strange, but first line, die early and avoid the fate. So first piece of advice he gives is die while you're young, die early, die while you're beautiful, and that way you won't ever have to become this crone Abishag. Okay, however, there's another piece of advice coming on after that. Okay, don't jump on that piece of advice straight away. If you predestined to that, if you're going to die late, okay, make up your mind to die in state. Okay, and then he goes on to talk about the stock exchange and the throne. What he's saying here is that if you're going to live, then make sure you're going to be rich. Make sure you're going to be able to take care of yourself, and you're not going to end up like Abishag. And what is the overall message of the poem from your first reading? It is quite a complex poem, but most people from the first few readings would look at this idea of taking care of yourself, being able to provide for yourself. Okay, so making sure you make enough money, making sure you're self-reliant, and you don't become reliant on anyone else. That in your old age, you're able to take care of yourself. Okay? That's our first reading of the poem. There is a few things we need to go through just to make sure we're really understanding what the poem is about. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is this name Abishag. Okay, now when you see a strange name like this in poetry, okay, we would most likely, there's probably a reference going on there. He's using the name Abishag. It's not a usual name, so we're going to definitely think there's something going on here. Abishag is someone important. And so Abishag is a character from the Old Testament of the Bible. So most of you will have heard of King David. King David, who slew Goliath and then became, as a young boy, and then became king. Now when King David was dying, he grew to be an old man, and when he was dying, what they did was to keep him warm. So he was dying of I'm not 100% sure what he was dying of, but he was constantly cold as part of the dying process. And in order to warm him up, his servants brought a young girl called Abishag to him. Okay, so she's a beautiful young girl, and she lay in bed with him. So she was hired to lie in bed and wrap herself around the king in order to share her warmth with him. Now, we do need to remember this. We're looking at a story from the Old Testament of the Bible. We're looking at something that's coming from about 3,000 years ago. It's a very strange concept here, but we are looking at a very, very different time period. Now, Abishag did not have a sexual relationship with King David. Okay, now this is really important at the time, but probably for a different reason than we might think. The reason why this is important is because if King David is too old to be able to have a sexual relationship with this girl, that calls into question his ability to be the king. Alright? So by not having a relationship with her, people start questioning if he was still able to be king. Right? So Abishag here, as a young beautiful girl, she may represent an inability of King David. Okay? Now when David died, his son Solomon became king. Solomon was the next king after David. But David had a lot of sons. Okay, that was quite typical of kings at the time. And one of his sons decided he fell in love with Abishag and decided he wanted to marry her. However, one of the laws of the time would be that if you married a courtesan of or a concubine of the king, or a wife, mainly the wife, but if you married the wife of the king, then you may have a claim to the throne. Okay? So here we can see that possibly this brother of Solomon, this other son of King David, is trying to take the role, the kingship from his brother. Solomon, can't be seen to allow this, and so he has his brother assassinated because of this. Okay, very cruel times. Okay, but this is how they act. Right, now Abishag is the main thing we need to get from here. Abishag became powerful and famous due to her beauty. Okay, by being the girl who was brought to the king, that gives her huge amounts of power and fame. Okay, and it's all just reliant on her beauty. They wanted the most beautiful girl in the world for the king. They found her, and she was put into this amazing position because of it. Okay, so however, her position it doesn't last. Okay, and that's where one of the main important points for Abishag for this poem is her beauty gets her a position of power and glory, but it doesn't last. Okay, and soon after David dies, and then this story with his sons, that's all we ever hear about Abishag. She never comes up again. Okay, she completely lost, And so this imagining of her as a withered hag, this comes from Frost. This is his imagining of it, but this is what he sees could have happened to her because she lost fame and glory that she was once given. There's also the concept here that the name Abishag means ignorance of the father. Okay, so you should be aware that most names do have meanings that come from different terminology and change over years. Abishag, the name means to be ignorant of the father. Okay, so that can definitely come into this idea here going on in the poem of providing and giving advice. If you think back to those questions I asked you to start, what advice do your parents give? The name Abishag stands in quite clearly there. So that is a bit of cultural context we need to know, cultural capital for Abishag. So when we're going to look back at the poem again, you need to keep that idea of Abishag in your mind. How does that strengthen the poem? However, there's something else going on as well. So it's quite a complex poem, there's a number of issues going on. And this is the historical context of the time. So, some of you will know this if you study history. In the 1930s, in America, President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced what he called his New Deal. Okay, now the New Deal was inspired by the Great Depression. So the Great Depression was a huge economic recession that started in 1929 and went through the 1930s. It was a world recession. Okay, it is the worst recession that we know of ever happening. Even when we had the recession in 2008, it was always quoted that this is the worst recession since the 1929 Wall Street crash. Okay. And the New Deal was Roosevelt's way of trying to help people through this economic difficulty, and it was aimed at giving financial aid to poor people and the unemployed. Okay. Now, this seems to us in the modern world like a great idea. However, at the time it met a huge amount of resistance. And the idea and Frost is one of these people who is resisting this. He doesn't like this idea, and it's a very commonly held view at the time. Right? So be careful, don't critique Frost too much for this view. It is a very common view at the time what he holds. And the idea is that if you help people by just giving them money, the poor and unemployed, you're encouraging them not to go out and get work for themselves. You're encouraging them to be reliant on charity. And there's a huge amount of, there's a definite opposition to this. Okay, there's a bitterness against the New Deal expressed in this poem. Okay, so just to go back, two things. Abishag represents the fame and beauty being lost, and then she loses all her power, and her fame and beauty won't last. The New Deal, the poem is critiquing this idea that you may be reliant on the state for aid rather than being reliant on yourself. Okay, so two things to keep in mind. So, go back to the poem. Based on your cultural and historical knowledge, you now has your interpretation of the poem changed. Okay, so I'm going to suggest you pause again here for a few seconds, read through the poem one or two more times, try and fit that information we just got into your reading of the poem. Okay, so we can see quite clearly that Abishag, was once the beauty Abishag. We can see quite clearly what he's trying to, the point he's trying to make here, that power and glory of beauty based on beauty won't last. There is a particular comment to make on this idea of the picture pride of Hollywood. He's bringing Abishag, a 3,000-year-old character from the Bible, into the modern world. He's saying that this idea is still relevant to the modern world because Hollywood didn't exist in the time of the Old Testament, obviously. So he's bringing this concept and saying that this isn't an ancient concept. This is very much relevant to modern world and modern media and our modern society. Okay, so we can see that concept of Abishag very much playing a part in this. Right. The other side, with the New Deal, we can see that there is a certain amount of dark humour in the poem. When we look at the start of stanza 3, die early and avoid the fate. This is a dark humour. This is not an aggressive demand upon people. Okay, he's not wishing people dead. He is simply he is trying to make them realise that it's not acceptable to be reliant on the state in his view. Okay, there is a bit of humour then coming on, make the whole stock exchange run obvious hyperbole and or occupy throne. Definite hyperbole going on here. Okay, we'll come back to it in a second. But what we need to look at is this New Deal. It's very much, you can see over and over again that he doesn't want people to be reliant on the state to take care of them. It's all about being self-sufficient. Okay, so we break it down into smaller sections so we can go through in a bit more detail. The witch that came, the withered hag, to wash the steps with pail and rag, was once the beauty Abishag. The picture pride of Hollywood, to many fall from great and good, for you to doubt the likelihood. There's 3 questions here. What warning is given in the opening 2 stanzas? Based on your knowledge of the name Abishag, can you see multiple interpretations of these lines? And why do you think Frost is a biblical character in the world of Hollywood? So I want to kind of mention some of that. Just pause here, 2 minutes, think about those questions, make sure you have a good answer yourself to each of those questions. Okay, so the warning that's been given in the opening 2 stanzas is this idea that you cannot be reliant on your beauty to get you by. That no matter how beautiful you are at a young age, you can still end up a withered hag washing steps with pail and rag. Okay, so don't be reliant on it. Our knowledge of Abishag, so we already know this idea of her beauty failing her. However, we talked about the idea of her name meaning ignorance of the father. Okay, so once the beauty Abishag, perhaps this is due to her ignorance, ignoring the advice of her parents that she's ended up in this way. Perhaps they would have given her the advice not to be reliant on beauty, but this is now coming back against her because she didn't listen. Think about the meaning of her name coming in there, because she's definitely using this name for a number of reasons. And then we said he puts the biblical character into the world of Hollywood. He's saying this is an eternal message, it's a universal message, not contained to one particular time period. A few little notes to make alongside this then. The opening lines outline that fame, beauty, glory do not last forever. Abishag was once the most beautiful woman in the world, and she is now a withered hag. The second stanza tells us that this is a common thing to happen, and it should be expected. Right? Too many fall from great good. It's not just Abishag. This happens over too many people, and it happens across time. It's happened from the time of the Bible, often to modern Hollywood. It happens to too many people. So the poet wants us to realize that life will not be easy and good things will not last forever. He is building the idea of needing to prepare for the future. And that's what he's trying to get across here. The poem is written in rhyming triplets, which gives an energy and almost childishness to the poem. Frost will be drawing on his dark humour, and this is reflected by the lightness of the rhyme and rhythm. So he writes in a very light way, but he's talking about very dark concepts later on throughout the poem, really. And this is where the dark humour comes from. It sounds like a nursery rhyme, but if you listen to the words, it's definitely not. In the context of the New Deal, it seems that Frost is saying that people should be preparing for bad times, such as happened with the Great Depression, and should not have to rely on the state to help them in these times. Nobody should expect good times to last forever, very similar to the ideas of the recent economic crash. And the meaning of Abishag's name as ignorance of the father may suggest that people who have not learned from the past will struggle as a result. Definitely is suggesting you look back to the past and learn from it. Alright, keep moving on. Die early and avoid the fate, or if predestined to die late, make up your mind to die in state. Make the whole stock exchange your own. If need be, occupy a throne where nobody can call you crone. Some have relied on what they knew, others on being simply true. What worked for them might work for you. So in the third stanza, what 2 options are we given about ways to avoid Abishag's fate? Do you think stanzas 3 and 4 are supposed to be taken seriously? What tone is suggested in the final line of the 5th stanza? Okay, so again, pause here for 2 minutes to think about each of those questions. Okay, so in the third stanza there's 2 options clearly given, and the first option is you can either die young and just not have to worry about any of this, or if you're going to live longer, then you need to make sure you're prepared. Okay, so that die early and avoid fate is very much a sarcastic comment. Okay, he's going for humour. Oh yeah, you can just die young and you won't have to worry about this then. Or if you want to live to be an older person, then you need to prepare. Okay, he's just trying to stick home with the idea you need to prepare. Sorry. stanzas 3 and 4, are they supposed to be taken seriously? We would probably suggest that no, they're not overly serious here. He is definitely being hyperbolic over and over again, so die early, and then making the whole stock exchange your own. Huge amount of hyperbole here, and he's just trying to make us realise the necessity, importance of the situation that we're in. The tone in the final line, fifth stanza, what worked for them might work for you. That use of the word might is incredibly important, and it brings in a doubting tone to the poem. Oh yeah, it might work for you, but he doesn't really believe it will work for you. Okay, so a few notes on this section. To avoid the terrible fate of Abishag, the narrator suggests the easiest path is simply die young. There's sarcastic exaggeration here and a sense of Frost's dark humour. If you don't want to die early, then you should instead gain power, which is represented by the throne or the wealth of the whole stock exchange, to ensure that you're respected and treated well once your looks have faded. Okay, so don't be reliant on your looks, have something else that you can rely on more consistently. In relationship to the New Deal context, Frost is saying that people need to be ready for the time when their lives are no longer easy and beautiful. You need to be prepared for the harsher moments of life. And there's a mission in the fifth stanza. Some people have gotten by in their schools in old age. So some people have gotten by quite easily throughout their entire life. However, the use of the word might in the last line is definite dubiousness around this eventuality. You can't be reliant on it. Alright, we look at the last two stanzas then. No memory of having starred atones for later disregard or keeps the end from being hard. Better to go down dignified, bought in friendship at your side, than none at all. Provide. What does Frost say about the past in the sixth stanza? What do you think he means by bought in friendship? And do you think the final statement, provide, is effective? What message do these words espouse? Okay, so again, pause here. Okay, so in the first question, sixth stanza, what's he saying about the past? He's telling us that memories of the past are not going to serve you very well if you're not prepared for later life. It doesn't matter how many great memories you have if you can't even take care of yourself at later life. He's talking about bought in friendship. The idea he seems to be going for here is better to have fake, false friendships, people who are there for your money but still there, rather than to have no one at all. Okay, so you may look at Frost's life here and think about how much he has lost. He's lost children, he's lost his wife. Throughout his life, there's a huge amount of loss within his life. Now, I'm not 100% sure how far into how many losses there have been at this stage, I'm afraid, but it's definitely something he is aware of, mortality, okay, and the fact that he may end up older and alone, and perhaps that's why he is so adamant that you need to prepare for the end. The final statement of provide, is it effective? What message do these words espouse? It definitely seems to be a call, okay? There's a call, a rallying call going on here, provide, okay? It feels like he's standing up in front of a group of people, speaking to them, rallying them to a cause. And that's essentially what he is trying to do, trying to get everyone to agree with him here, okay? And it's getting through, it's a way of getting through this message, a very simple word to get through the entire message of be prepared for any eventuality. So, a few notes here. The sixth stanza reiterates the earlier points in the poem that memories in the past will not help you in old age if you're not prepared. Very straightforward. Friends and memories do nothing to help those in poverty. Ross states that it would be better to have false friends but the money to provide for yourself. Okay? So now, he's not saying that all friends are going to be false. What he's saying is that don't be reliant on friends living for as long as you have. You need money, and if you don't have money, if you can't provide for yourself, just nothing else is going to really matter. Okay? You have to have the basic need that you need to be able to provide for yourself. If you don't have that, nothing else is going to be relevant. The final cry, provide, seems almost like a rallying chant. Frost is clearly calling on the public to take care of themselves and be practical in their lives. The poem may go against our typical expectations of poetry, and that is eminently practical rather than ideological, and emphasise the life which Frost led as a labouring man, who was as aware of working class life and issues as well as high literature and literary movements or sensibilities. A lot of words there. Basically what I'm saying there is that this isn't what we usually expect in poetry. poetry often, we expect them to say, oh, enjoy the beauty of life, enjoy the individual moments. What is life? Don't be spending all your time making money. What is life if you don't enjoy the perfection of nature or all these beautiful aspects of life? Frost, however, we know comes from a labouring background. He comes from a background where he hasn't always had money, and he is aware of the difficulties of not having money and not being able to provide for yourself, or to struggle to provide. And so he is telling us that yes, there is beauty in the world, but if you can't provide your basic needs, then that's not going to matter. So he is a very practical person, he has a very practical approach to life, and he's very much saying that don't be sitting here thinking about the beauty of life unless you have your basic needs taken care of first. Okay, so quite a lot going on in terms of the tones poems. There's 3 different interpretations we're going to look at here. First reading poem, we'll take it at Frost means what he says. He's advocating American style self-reliance and feels deeply that it's up to each individual to provide for themselves, and it's very much a very strong idea of time. Take care of yourself. You have the opportunities to go out and work hard. It's very much the ideas that America at this time is pushing. The humour in this interpretation is not gentle, and the message would seem to be reinforced by the sharp rhyme in the poem. Advice is clearly still to be taken with humour, but the message is indeed advice is literal. So it is literal advice. Do this. There is the humour there, he's exaggerating things like that, but the advice is still literal advice. You must apply it for yourself. The second reading, however, may suggest Frost is mocking this principle, and indeed himself as an exponent of these ideas. So we know that he did believe in these ideas, but maybe he's mocking that. So if we think back to the idea of after apple picking, that he is working hard in after apple picking, but he still struggles to reach his goals. So does he simultaneously strive to be self-reliant, but then realise that it's not always going to happen? And is he mocking this idea that, if you prepare, everything will work out? And is trying to state that actually sometimes life is going to be difficult, no matter how prepared you are, no matter how hard you work, maybe you're not going to be able to provide for yourself. Okay, so maybe he's mocking that idea that he has always kind of went by, and maybe so, the ignorance of the father, maybe through Abishag's name, could be standing out differently here. Maybe he's saying that we should ignore the advice that he would have been given from possibly taken from his older generations, that he must provide for himself. Maybe he's saying that's just not good enough. Something else needed than that. Life could be hard either way. Don't think that just because you work hard, everything's going to be easy. Final interpretation we want to look at hinges on the final stanza and takes the advice here as literal, though morbid. It's the idea that even with wealth and having prepared for the end of life, we are left with only thought and friendship, being the only alternative to a lonely and undignified old age. Suggests that there is no real comfort at the end of life. So what he's doing, what we could see here, is that he's very much concentrating on death and the nature of death and the end of life, and saying that no matter how much you prepare, the end of your life is going to be difficult. You might have thought and friendship, you might have false friends around you, and that's the only way to get away, to avoid being totally lonely and undignified. But there's essentially no comfort. Nothing is ever going to comfort you at the end. And this can maybe be supported by a quote from something Frost said after reading the poem in 1961. The worst part of life is the end. You can't keep the end from being hard. Not to state, nobody but God. So only God can make the end of your life any easier. So we could see this entire poem as a commentary on life. No material possession or gained wisdom can protect us from the brutal realities of life. Life is difficult no matter how much you prepare for it. Right. On a final note then, unlike another poem of Frost, there's little imagery in provide, other than the image of Abishag, so you definitely need to talk about that idea of Abishag. Okay, there are a few techniques in there in terms of the rhyming triplets. You could talk about the rallying call at the end of provide. There's a lot going on in there which you can go back and see. There's little imagery other than that image of Abishag, and the poem instead works on argument and rhetoric. Okay, so it's very, very different in that way to most of Frost's other poems.